We're now ready to work on these last three sentences. Let's save this one. This one will take some work. Clauses 135 and 36. These are descriptive relative clauses. Let's work on those first. And this is saying, John, who read that book, saw Mary. And if we rest our cursor here, right now it says surface realization equals blank. And there's a reason for that. When we go here, we told it to use a relative pronoun. Back when we imported this document, right here, we said use relative pronouns for all of the descriptive relative clauses. But we never told it what relative pronoun to use. So as soon as we choose one of these, this option becomes available. So let's go ahead and select in here relative pronoun. So now when we rest our cursor here, we see that surface realization equals relative pronoun, and features change from surface realization equals noun to relative pronoun by relativization structures and strategies, descriptive relative clause strategies, subject. So if we generate it, generated text is identical. Let's save it. And when we go here, okay, this is saying John, whom Mary saw, read that book. Okay, here, the surface realization is set to relative pronoun, but it won't be in the right place. John, Mary saw whom, read that book. In English, when there's a relative pronoun, we want it to come up at the beginning of the sentence, the beginning of the relative clause. So let's go to our phrase structure rule for clauses. And you remember this section for promoted constituents? We added this for the existential. Let's put another constituent in here that says noun phrase, and if we go to our head word, relative pronoun. Okay, there it is. So now when we generate this, John, who Mary saw, read that book. So let's save it. And I think the other one that needs work, yeah, this one, the man who read a book and ate a fish saw Mary. So we have two relative clauses here, modifying the same noun. The man who read a book and that ate a fish saw Mary. And if we rest our cursor here, we can see that sequence equals first coordinate. Whenever there's more than one noun, more than one relative clause modifying the same noun, they will be tagged in a sequence. So this sequence is first coordinate, and this relative clause has the sequence set to last coordinate. So when there's a coordinate relative clause, we don't want there to be a relativizer. So let's go back to our rule. And we'll say, when there's a coordinate relative clause, sequence is over here. So if it's coordinate or last coordinate, then we don't want this relativizer. Let's delete that preposition. Okay. So if it's coordinate or last coordinate, then delete the relativizer. Okay, that solved that problem. We don't get the word that anymore, but now we're back to this problem. The man that read a book and ate a fish saw Mary. And the reason for that is because when these rules are executed, TBTA starts with the last structure. And when it finds a structure that matches, then it stops. And it does whatever that structure does, and then that rule is done. It moves on to the next rule in the grammar. Unless you check this. Remember, a rule that converts, that deletes that and changes it to a relative pronoun is back here. This one here. This converts it to a relative pronoun and deletes the relativizer. So TBTA was never getting here. It found this structure, and it matched, so it deleted the relativizer, and then this entire rule was done. So TBTA moved on to the next section of rules. But by checking this box, now when this is done, it will keep searching the previous structures. The man who read a book and ate a fish saw Mary. So let's save that. And while we're here, I want to show you a few things. Eventually, you might get to a point where this rule isn't behaving the way you want, and you're not sure why. If that time comes, you can't set a breakpoint here. Most of these rules you can set a breakpoint, but I've mentioned before that all of the rules down through and including noun-noun relationships are executed before the verse is displayed to us. So you can't set a breakpoint up in here. But there may come a time when this rule isn't doing what you want, and you want to set a breakpoint. Okay, to get around that, we have this button here. Copy this rule to structural adjustments. Do you want to copy this relative clause rule to the structural adjustment rules? We'll say yes. And it's turned off for us. This rule is currently turned off. Do you want the rule status set on? No. And what that did is it now copied our relative clause rule to right here. Here's the exact same rule. Now here we can set a breakpoint. If you watch that other video series, I'll let you know. All you have to do is click on the rule's name, and now that rule's name is here, grammar spy invoked at, we can say initialize and generate. And now we can watch this rule being executed step by step. We won't do this because it takes a long time. We'll just say finish generation. But if the time comes when your relative clause rule doesn't work the way you want, you can copy it down, debug it here, so to speak, and then once it's working, make your changes back up in this rule. Then you want to delete this rule. So we want to delete this one now. And let's go back to this rule and turn it back on. And let's make sure it still works. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and regenerate all of these sentences. This time we're going to compare, not save. And I'll time-lapse this. Okay, there are no differences, meaning all of the sentences that are generated by our grammar right now match the saved text. So that's good. I want to show you one more thing. There's actually a better way to work on these relative clause rules, but this better way only works if you activated one of these rules. Going back many videos ago, we worked on the feature adjustment rules. And here, if you activated this, adding a feature to noun phrases called relativized, and the two values are yes or no. If you activated this, then there's actually a better way to write your relative clause rules. Now we activated this, so I'm going to go and show you that better way. Okay, right now, these rules depend on this noun index. We have the head noun, and it has an index value of I. And then in here we also have another noun with an index value of I. Well, a better way is to use that feature, relativized. If we say yes, if we use that feature, then now we know this is the relativized noun, and we no longer need this noun. Let's copy these features of masculine and feminine over here. Okay, attention. You have already set some of the features for this constituent to particular values in the output structure. If you edit this constituent's features in the input structure, you'll need to re-enter the new feature values in the output structure again. Do you want to continue? We'll say no. Okay, the one we've specified in the output is relative pronoun. So now that we know that, let's go ahead here and say yes. Okay, let's set this to masculine and feminine. Now in the output we have to re-enter relative pronoun. And now, because we're using this relativized value, we don't even need this noun anymore. And we also don't need this noun list index. So we can say set nominal index to no index. So now this has to be a masculine or feminine noun inside the NP-rel, and it will be converted to a relative pronoun. Let's do this for all of the structures, because it is a better way to write your relative clause rules. But again, it only works if you activated that one particular rule earlier. So now we can delete this noun, delete this index, we can delete this noun, delete this index, and one more. Okay, so it should work exactly the same. Let's regenerate all of our sentences again, and again I'll time-lapse this. Okay, they're all the same. So that finishes the section on relative clauses.